I think your career and how you move and excel within your career largely sits with you. It's about being bold, being brave, and kind of grabbing opportunities when, where, and if you find them.
Welcome to the HR on the Brain podcast. Here we explore innovative approaches to dealing with key HR challenges so that you can continue to add massive value in your organization. I'm your host, Sheree Comninellis. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the HR on the Brain podcast. I'm your host, Sheree Comninellis, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Jo Blake. Jo is currently the Group Talent Acquisition Lead for the Absa Group Limited, and here she gets an opportunity to lead the strategic vision for talent acquisition for the function group-wide. And as Jo described herself, if there's one thing you can count on, it's that she will break not only with tradition, but mess with stereotypes. And having worked with Jo, I can agree that this is definitely correct. With close to 2 decades in the talent acquisition space, she's continued to push herself to learn more, to do more. And she's also earned during that time both an honours degree from the University of Stellenbosch in psychology, as well as a master's degree in psychology from UKZN, all while also having a successful modelling career. Crazy. And really for Jo, knowing how to read people coupled with ambition and a key ability to drive productivity has led her to really be enjoying her career as a seasoned headhunter, negotiator, and talent matchmaker. Jo, I am so excited to have you here with us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm super excited for the conversation. I'm very privileged that you invited me here, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jo. So, Jo, let's go back to the very beginning. What was your first ever role in HR, and how did you land up there?
Yeah, interesting. It's an interesting journey for me because obviously started out studying psychology and very much went into wanting to position myself as a therapist quite early on in my life. That took a turn. I decided at age 24, that's not what I want to do any longer, to my dismay. Into a bit of an entrepreneurial journey, but really found myself touching on human resources when I obviously entered the world. It's funny, I went for an actual interview to be a candidate for a PR and marketing role because that's where I was kind of positioning and pegging myself. And I was quite interested into breaking into that world. When I had the opportunity of meeting one of the executives at the actual recruitment agency, that was DAV at the time, and she said, "Have you ever thought of doing recruitment?" And I said to her, "No, I don't even know what recruitment is."
Wow.
You know, she explained to me, and I think what really stood out for me and kind of jumped at me was the people-centered sort of focus on recruitment. Yes, you are selling people's experience and skill and you're assisting in terms of their careers. But I think what was really beautiful was the impact that it could have on people. And just the fact that you're able to kind of craft what it is that they're looking for from a career perspective. But then also you got that kind of ambit of influencing their lives. And a lot of the time, I remember one of my first placements was actually a graduate who had his first role in corporate. And that significantly changed just his family life, you know, and
yes.
So that really appealed to me, and I was like, okay, well, I'm here for it. Let's try it out. So that was really one of my key roles, and my kind of love for recruitment was born from that experience.
Fantastic. And in that space, you know, you mentioned the candidate that you were able to place, and that was quite a warm, significant moment for your recruiting career early on. Did you ever come across challenges in that space in your early career? Is there one that you remember that maybe stand out for you?
100%. I think, Sheree, when you think of the world of recruitment, so you've got obviously organizations that you're approaching, you're positioning key talent with critical talent most of the time, majority of the time. And the talent kind of landscape is tough. It's hard.
Yes.
You're fighting against, and I use the word loosely, but you're really up against a whole lot of other competitors in the market, and you're wanting to position and really differentiate your candidates from anyone else. I had a couple of tears along the way because what I quickly learned about human commodities is that they change their minds.
Yes.
And they change their minds often. So often what you think is a fantastic opportunity and it's ticking all these boxes, it really does still come down to the person at the end of the day and whether it makes sense for them. And one of the key standouts for me was I was moving this young guy as well. He was a Java developer at the time. And I remember getting the assignment and thinking like Java, the only thing about Java that I know is coffee. I quickly had to learn, what exactly. You can't speak the language of the customer at the end of the day, and you don't really understand the intricacies around the business and their model and their strategy, you're not going to hit the mark in terms of matching that talent to the opportunity. But I remember I was moving this young gentleman from one Java role into another, and Java developers are like very hard to find.
Okay.
At that point as well. And, he said to me, Jo, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what I want from a company culture perspective, the opportunity, trajectory. And I was like, tick, 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 tick. And he went through all these beautiful interviews, and the client was just fantastic find, only to come to the end of it. And he was just like, no, I can't do this right now. And what it boiled down to, that connection that he had with his current company, and that he actually felt he couldn't leave them kind of in the lurch, And it is resigning from a company, moving, a career change is one of the biggest kind of decisions. And it's 100%. And it's often very stressful. So I think like that culmination of just from a timing perspective, the fact that it was so real when he got that offer, I think it was overwhelming for him. And unfortunately, he kind of exited from the process, which left me in tears. I'll be honest, because I had to start all over again trying to find another replacement. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I think a lot of HR professionals can relate to the tears at work situation. I think we've all had one of those. I know I've had my share as well. And so, Jo, when did you feel, looking at it from your perspective, that your career started to really get momentum in terms of the HR space? Because that was your first role back then. And how did the momentum move?
I think for me, what's key and pivotal that I want to land here is the kind of notion and idea around sponsorship. And quite early on in my career, I found somebody who recognized my drive and ambition and kind of my vision that I had with regards to my career. And she was so pivotal, I think, Sheree, just in terms of how I positioned myself within the context of work. But then very quickly almost became like a coach in that she was giving me very objective feedback around and constructive feedback around if these are the goals that I'm wanting to hit or achieve, this is how I need to either reposition myself, refine what it is I'm putting out there, and just helped coach me around certain aspects of how I was showing up. And that information and that point of just having like a sounding board and someone to say, are you sure you're considering everything? Have you thought of this? That for me was critical. And I think very key where I started realizing, hey, my role at agency when I was a recruitment consultant was very much like a sales orientated role. So it didn't feel like it had that human element of like HR. But once I started moving internally to an internal recruitment consultant or a talent acquisition specialist, that's where I started really understanding where I fit into the employee value chain, the employee life cycle, what my role actually does, in essence, for the company, what impact I'm making within the company. And once those pennies started dropping and I had the full picture of where I actually fit in and what impact I'm making, I think that for me was where I was like, right, I'm in the right place at the right time. And I loved what I did. Recruitment, it's just something that I love doing. I think there's enough variety to keep me interested and engaged because I need that in my career. But I do think that having a role of somebody that was sponsoring me, stuck their neck out to say, I will kind of stand by Jo and what it is that she brings to the table, that really helped craft and make me understand the full picture of what impact I could have potentially in this space.
Thanks so much. I think that is such a beautiful point. I think for myself as well, I can also think of a similar person that I've had in my career that's helped me to also develop, especially in the more senior roles. And just like you say, to see that bigger picture, that it's not just, in my case, training a group of people or managing a training function, but it's about how does training serve this organization's corporate goals and mission as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I definitely experienced the same. And so, Jo, if someone's looking to get that kind of a person, a sponsor, someone to work with them to build their career, where would they start?
And it's an interesting question that you ask, because I think, and I was going to speak from the context of being kind of a woman in the workplace. I think as women are as driven to seek out that type of relationship. And again, it touches on various things, but like if I have to think of it from a camaraderie perspective, when you look at male colleagues and how they show up versus female colleagues, it's quite different. Realities are very different, right? But I do think as women in the workplace, we've got to start being bolder about putting ourselves out there. And when it comes to sponsorship or even mentorship, it's not just about striking up a conversation and asking somebody to be your sponsor. I think what you've got to very quickly do is help people understand, number one, what is it that you're wanting to achieve out of the relationship, especially where a sponsor is concerned. Because in essence, a sponsor, you'd want to find somebody within your current organization that is sitting in a leadership role, that is sitting in an influential role. Your mentor, for example, could sit outside of your organization, and that's very different. But a sponsor's, I suppose, goal around having a sponsor are very different versus mentor and mentee relationship. And I think for me, what's crucial with the sponsor is what is it that I'm wanting to achieve, number one, from the relationship. And number two, you've got to be able to articulate what's in it for the sponsor. So if they're sitting in a leadership in an influential position, you're in essence coming to them with this pitch around why is it that you're wanting a sponsor, for them to sponsor you. You've got to also see them yourself as an extension of their brand. So in essence, if they're going to stick their neck out for you, you've got to make sure that you're bringing it so that, whatever it is that you're doing from a work perspective, a delivery perspective, reflects exactly what it is that they're wanting to put out there, number one, and also reflects well on them, so that they do then have the comfort of, okay, if I'm opening doors for you to conversations that you wouldn't necessarily be privy to, for example, or platforms for that matter, that they're comforted that you are going to be able to hold your own in that. And I think that's really crucial. And when it comes to identifying a sponsor, I mean, we can leverage off so many different things. But what I did was I looked around the organization for somebody that mirrored the same values as me, for somebody that mirrored the same sort of work ethic. And I was close to those people, and I was intentional about getting close to those people. And then also giving them sight of what it is that I could potentially do. And if, for example, your sponsor's got something, like if I have to think of it from a specialist talent acquisition perspective, what worth can I bring to the table that's going to reflect well on them? And once they see that connection, I think it becomes so much easier when you're putting it in front of them and you're pitching the idea of why you're wanting a sponsor.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. But I love what you've just drawn out there, particularly is that it's not just about the sponsor helping you build your career, but it's also about, firstly, you working hard to show up, add value, do the work, and to also support your sponsor's visions or goals that they are maybe working towards within the company with you. And I agree. 100%. I think that then brings a perfect relationship to the fore. So when do you move into your kind of first, you would say, senior position? And what year was that?
That was, what year was that? Sure. I would say it was definitely within the context of my previous role. So when I worked for the Sheree Group, I came in at a sort of a middle management level. And when I left there, I was sitting at a senior leadership level. So for me, I remember it was a case of taking almost a lateral career move to get the Fashini Group. And I was very intentional around what am I going to get out of this lateral move? Because I wasn't necessarily looking for a lateral move. I was, of course, at that wanting to kind of move up the career ladder, so to speak. But I think what the Fashini Group offered me at that point in my career was scale. I mean, if you think of how large the organization is, there I would gain breadth in terms of, who I'm working with across the organization, how many stakeholders, and the impact of that was that I think I deepened, number one, my sense of sort of experience working at that level, and then the opportunity for people to then see what you showcase within the workplace, what you can achieve, and then very quickly I was very, again, intentional about I'm wanting to move in my career. What are the things that I need to hit from an individual development perspective? And then what type of experience am I requiring sort of in my buckets of experience and skill that would help me be ready for that next move within that environment?
Absolutely. I totally agree with the breadth and just the scale of regions, people, numbers that such a role can give you. And so would you say that was 10 years into your career, 5 years into your career?
I would say, Sheree, I was age 33. That was about around 8 years into my career, in fact. Wow. Think of specialist recruitment. So often when I reflected my entrepreneurial kind of journey, that was also managing of talent, but it wasn't specifically in the recruitment kind of bucket. So when I think of my journey along the lines of actually managing talent and that kind of experience, I'd love to include that. But if I think about it just purely around recruitment roles, I would say it was just under 10 years. Yeah.
Sure. That's incredible. And I think it's so good for us to hear that, because I think a lot of the time people can feel frustrated that they're maybe not having the movement they desire in their roles. But it does take time. I think even for myself in my career, I also, had that time that needed to be there before the bigger moves took place. What would you advise someone that perhaps is sitting in that place and feeling that frustration of, wow, I've been in this middle management role, this type of role for the last 5 years, and I'm really wanting a break here to move to a higher level? What would you share with them?
I think what it really boils down to is you. Often what I find in organizations is you've got all this beautiful talent, right, sitting there bubbling under. But it does take visibility of that talent to come to the fore for people to go, oh, who is that? Or, hey, I want to get to know who that person is. So it comes down to, I suppose, your why. So what is your biggest reason for wanting to kind of move up the career sort of ladder? I can put it that way. And when you're sitting and reflecting on, I've been at middle management for X amount of years, what have you done to really start differentiating yourself from other that are sitting at that level as well? Because you've got to, I think, champion your own career and your own career trajectory. The organization's not sitting there with a whole lot of people like waiting to see, where talent's going to emerge from. So it does rest with you to kind of drive your career development. And whether it is about looking at kind of your experience within that middle management space, what have you done to craft your individual sort of development? So whatever gaps you may have had, or if you're thinking with the forward-looking view, and a lot of the time we do psychometric assessments when you come into organizations. So if you look at your psychometric assessments, for example, what do you have that you can potentially close while you're at middle management so that you're readying yourself for when there is an opportunity available, you're putting up your hand, but you also know that you're putting up your hand and you're ready for it. So I think that's really crucial to me. When I look at my career, I was going, what is it that I need to bring to the table? And then how can I bring visibility to the work that I'm doing to show the impact that I'm having on the organization? And for key people, influential people, leaders in the organization to experience see that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think for me, it was similar. I completely agree. It's, showing that what's the impact that I bring to the space that maybe others don't, or that maybe the organization needs at this moment. And how can I then show people that? Because I found colleagues of mine or people I've known in the corporate space who have maybe experienced these feelings often weren't maybe as likely to make their work visible. They were maybe doing fantastic work, but no one knew about it. And so then that became a barrier for them in terms of career growth.
And I know that feels awkward, hey, Sheree? Like if I have to, you're sitting there and you're going like, okay, so I've done this beautiful piece of work and now I've got to get people to see it. And oh, shucks, what are people going to say and how they're going to receive it? And I think if you think of it in the context of your work is so much more than just who you are and what you're bringing, helping an organization better itself. And if there's opportunity for colleagues to have input into that and into the beautiful work that you're doing, then why not? Then it takes it away from being a personal, oh my gosh, I feel a little bit showy offy about it. No, the intention here is for everybody at the organization, or even as a people function, for example, to benefit from the piece of work. So it then becomes less about like, hi, I'm Jo and I'm showing off about my piece of work that I'm doing. It's more about, hi, I'm Jo, I'm your colleague. This is what I've come up with. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? How can we make it better? Or what are your thoughts on it? Then it's about a co-creation of how can we get our people function to look as beautiful, efficient, sexy, etc.
Absolutely. It's so interesting because I definitely have memories of putting myself out there in my career and then having comments from colleagues saying, how are you brave enough to go talk to that person, that sits in the corner office or whatever? Or why were you talking to so-and-so? And I'd be like, is this a weird thing to do? I don't know. I thought this was what people do. But absolutely. And I think also just as colleagues, and it ties back to what you said about women in the workplace earlier, supporting each other with making those moves. Because
100%.
Sometimes the opposite happens when you're that person putting yourself out there. People are saying, maybe negative things. And then you're having that whole element to deal with as well. So I think it just ties back so well to what you previously mentioned. And Jo, I've seen that, for in your role on LinkedIn especially, but also in the industry, I guess there is this move towards, from just talent acquisition through to employer branding. And that shift has kind of been taking place for a while. And you and your work at the Absa Group Limited has really been showcasing what that looks like. How have you how did that come about? And what are you seeing in terms of successes from putting the Absa Group out there in that way?
Thank you. Yeah. I must admit to you that the role at Absa is so beautifully crafted for me, I think, at this point in my life, because it was a funny thing. I came into Absa like early 2020 and we went like straight into lockdown. And I was, oh my gosh, I'm required to network with people for my role. So, I'm new to the organization. I'm needing to learn it, needing to learn its people. And now I'm sitting in COVID. And COVID presented a unique opportunity for us. So prior to kind of 2020, there was obviously the uncoupling of Absa from Barclays, etc. And we did the whole rebranding and everyone was really excited about that. And it got to a point where we've also had to now relook at kind of what is our employee value proposition and what is our employer brand out there in the market. And if I have to be completely honest with you, I think when I shared with my peers that I'm moving into Absa, everyone was like, oh my word, Absa, hey, they go through so much change. And I was like, okay, what's a big deal? Because for me, change it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. And I saw it as an opportunity. And so that really kind of sparked, questions in my head about what is our brand perception out there in the talent market. And so, working across with peers in the organization, with preferred suppliers outside, really got a unique sort of opportunity to understand very intimately from our colleague engagement surveys and exit interview data and things like that, what was the sense and sentiment around sort of our employer brand. And of course, COVID hit. And so we don't always have the opportunity now to host candidates at our offices and make a whole fanfare about it. Because when we did the face-to-face, you could really sense of the people that are in the organization, what the organization is all about, and experience that. And I think what was born out of the whole COVID and lockdown situation was the fact that we wanted to take a message of what is Absa about and who does Absa stand for, and really at the center of that is people, right? So an organization is only an organization as far as its people are concerned. And so when I interact with the Sheree, I am really a walking, talking advert for Absa. And so it was about sharing stories that exist within Absa that'll give external talent and the external talent market a window into our culture, our leadership, what's kind of topical and relevant right now. And so it was really about storytelling and telling the actual Absa story, because I think for us, there was a little bit of a gap in that. Often talent would look at us and go, oh, do I join that organization? Yeah, great, they've got beautiful opportunities, but do I know enough about the culture? Because all they're hearing about is change in leadership or change in this or change in that. And sometimes that could be a bit scary for other people. But beyond just the change, I think there's such beautiful stories that exist with colleagues, with our leaders. And so it was humanizing the workplace for us. And I think we used LinkedIn and the LinkedIn Live events to bring those stories to the forefront. And to really bring an essence of who the people are behind the Absa brand.
Yeah. And I think you really are achieving that. Look, at least from my perspective, I always, when I see the videos, I go, it feels like I'm there at Absa.
Yes.
I'm experiencing it. That is really great. And Jo, if you're thinking about things that you're working on at the moment, is there anything specifically that you're looking for or needing assistance with that comes to mind, or an exciting project you're working on that you'd love to share with us, that you can share with us? What's next for you?
Yeah. I mean, look, at Absa, we're always looking for talent and talented individuals. And I think when we think of the landscape of talent within Absa, our disposition is that everybody at Absa is talent. So we'd like to think that we're recruiting talented individuals into the organization. What you do with your career is very much about being self-driven. And even in the context of learning and development, we're looking for people that are wanting, that are hungry to learn. And I think learning offerings within Absa are best in class. And so if you're looking for an environment and opportunities where you can grow your career and there is opportunity to move within the organization, then Absa is certainly one for you. I know for us at the moment, that's key and crucial, is just our focus on our employer brand and those activities, and really articulating what our value proposition is to both our colleagues that are already part of Absa and then the external market. What's key there is we've just recently been certified as a top employer, so we're super proud of that.
Congrats.
Thank you. It was our first time attempting it, and it was our first time that we actually got certified in one go. So that was really awesome. But it's really about taking the feedback from the top employer certification process and really looking at where are the areas that we didn't really kind of hit benchmark, for example, best practice levels in the global context, and focusing and fine-tuning it from a people practice perspective. What then are we going to do to close those gaps so that we are sitting from a people practice perspective against all of those benchmarks, or even exceeding the benchmark. The global benchmark at the moment, I think, is about 85.5 across all of your people practices. And those touch on various things like talent acquisition, your wellness offerings, reward, culture, obviously strategic leadership, all of those things. So it's really for us to look at those and see how then we can refine and even better our people practices. And I think that's for us as a journey, alongside with obviously how do we then articulate what our value proposition is for both candidates coming into the organization and obviously our colleagues alike. And then on top of that, that we're wanting to go roll out of this year is our alumni network. So we're crafting to see, what opportunities exist within that space. And I always think, just because you've exited from one company, like if I had to reflect on, for example, the Fashini Group, I loved working there. I worked there for a long time.
Yes.
And into a different province, etc., presented different things for me, my family, my career. But I have really fond memories about TFG. And when I speak about TFG to other colleagues, it's almost like I'm still working there.
I have the same.
So just because you've exited from a company, it doesn't mean that we can't still leverage relationships, their skill sets, etc. So with the Absa alumni in mind, that is exactly kind of the ethos and how we want to position our alumni network. It's about creating that sense of brand ambassadorship just beyond, you coming to have a career at the organization, but we can still maintain a relationship even beyond that kind of realm.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Firstly, I think what a privilege to, be at a company where there is that constant focus on improvement and refinement in people's strategy. Yes. I don't think that exists in every business, so that's awesome. And the alumni network, I really think, is a next level idea, because absolutely, once someone leaves a company, they're still talking about you. And so that's an extension of your employer brand. So I love that. I think that is you, as you said, breaking stereotypes and traditions. This is very like a new thing I've not heard of before. So I'm loving that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jo. And I'm going to ask you one last question before we end. And
sure, go for it.
No, and that is, what is your kind of number one best tip or piece of advice you'd give to HR leaders out there as they're building their careers?
Sure. There's so much to offer, but I do think I'm going to give a more human tip as opposed to a career tip. I think your career and how you move and excel within your career largely sits with you. It's about being bold, being brave, and kind of grabbing the opportunities where and if you find them. And even if you're not finding them, it's about creating the opportunities yourself. So I'll leave that career tip on the side. But really, for me, what I've seen, if I reflect on my career up until this point, and the leader that I'm intending to be, and the legacy that I'm trying to leave, is there's so much strength and vulnerability. I think as a female within the workplace, you're always trying to, and I'm very competitive, I'll just say it right there. So
we have that in common.
Yes. And I quickly learned early on, and from my sponsor, we can create space for each other. The table is big enough for all of us.
100%.
And I think that's the kind of the hat that I wear as a leader. And it doesn't mean because you're showing up as compassionate and kind that you can't win. I totally believe that you can 100% still win, still hit the goals, still achieve what you set out to, but it's the how you do it. And for me, I want to leave people kind of better than I found them. And so I'm trying to create that sort of leadership legacy where I can do it with kindness and compassion, still win. But I think the trigger and the I suppose what it relies on for you as an individual is to be vulnerable and to show people, whether you're a leader or not, this is kind of where you're sitting, and just show up as human. And I think if I reflect on sort of what talent is looking for in the marketplace, especially now that we're moving into kind of hybrid work and the global kind of geographical lines have kind of, gone up in smoke. So whether you're sitting in the UK or the US or South Africa, it doesn't matter where you are, you can work from anywhere in the world. If I think of it in that context and what talent is asking for, and when I say talent, I'm talking about people that are looking for moves. They're looking for an organization that's going to see them as a whole human being. So I no longer leave my little 5-year-old kind of at the door when I walk into an Absa building. My home is my Absa building. My home is my children. It's how I've got hats on when I'm here. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a HR leader, but it's also contextualizing that and being able to say, I see you, Jo, and this is how we can make your time here with us better, how we can make your career with us better, but just seeing you as a human being.
Absolutely. Oh, that is such a gem of a piece of advice. And I can completely relate to both of them. And I think definitely if someone tries to start implementing those, they'll see immediate shifts in how their career is moving through. Thank you so much, Jo. It was such a pleasure talking to you. And I know our listeners are going to get the best value out of all of the gems you dropped today. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode and spending the time with us. I would love to meet you. Join us at our next event where we discuss a key HR challenge. To sign up, visit www.thebrainebox.com/events. And if you enjoyed this show, I'd be so grateful if you left us a review on iTunes. Talk soon.